Man is not truly one, but truly two. Robert Louis Stevenson, Dr. Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde. We all like to think we know ourselves. We have an image of who we are, our values, strengths, and weaknesses. But beneath this carefully crafted self-perception lies a hidden layer, a side of us we refuse to acknowledge. This is what Carl Jung called the shadow self. The shadow is made up of everything we reject, suppress, or deny about ourselves. It is the collection of thoughts, emotions, and desires that society, family, or personal experiences have taught us to bury. The anger we were told not to express, the fears we were ashamed to admit, the vulnerabilities we learned to hide, these all live in the shadow. It is not just made of so-called negative traits, but also of aspects of ourselves that we once possessed but were forced to abandon, such as creativity, assertiveness, or a sense of adventure. As children, we start out whole. We express our emotions freely, crying when we're hurt, laughing when we're happy, demanding attention when we need it. But as we grow, we learn that certain behaviors are unacceptable. Perhaps we were scolded for showing anger, so we learned to suppress it. Maybe we were laughed at for being too sensitive, so we built a hardened exterior. Over time, these parts of us don't disappear. They retreat into the unconscious, forming what Jung called the shadow. And yet, the shadow does not remain buried forever. It leaks out in ways we don't expect. A sudden burst of rage over something small, a lingering resentment towards someone for reasons we don't fully understand, an irrational fear that holds us back. When we repress parts of ourselves, they find a way to express themselves in disguise, through projection, emotional triggers, and subconscious patterns that seem to repeat themselves in our lives. Projection is one of the most common ways the shadow reveals itself. When we dislike or judge something in others, it is often because it mirrors something unrecognized within ourselves. Have you ever found yourself irritated by someone's arrogance, only to later realize that you suppress your own confidence? Or resenting someone's neediness, only to recognize a buried fear of dependency within yourself? Jung believed that what we see in others is often a reflection of what we have denied in ourselves. But the shadow is not only an individual phenomenon. It exists within cultures, communities, and even entire societies. The qualities that a society collectively rejects, whether it be vulnerability, ambition, or independence, become part of its cultural shadow, manifesting in cycles of repression, division, and conflict. This is why understanding the shadow is so important. If we remain unaware of it, it continues to shape our lives in ways we don't see. It influences the decisions we make, the relationships we enter, and the emotional patterns we repeat. It dictates what we fear, what we crave, and what we avoid. The less we acknowledge it, the stronger its hold over us becomes. But what happens when we do acknowledge it? What does it mean to face the parts of ourselves that we have spent a lifetime suppressing? And more importantly, how does this hidden side of us shape our destiny in ways we never imagined? To answer these questions, we need to go deeper into how the shadow self influences our thoughts, behaviors, and unconscious choices. Because once we understand that, we begin to see the patterns that have been guiding our lives all along. We like to believe that we are in control of our lives, that our choices are made consciously, based on logic, experience, and personal values. But if that were true, why do we so often find ourselves trapped in the same cycles, repeating the same mistakes, drawn to the same destructive relationships, or held back by the same fears? Jung argued that much of what we believe to be rational decision-making is actually steered by the unconscious, influenced by parts of ourselves that we have refused to acknowledge. The shadow, when left unchecked, does not sit idle. It actively shapes our behavior, our perceptions, and even our reality. One of the clearest ways this happens is through projection. Because the shadow is made up of aspects of ourselves that we have rejected, we tend to disown them by seeing them in others. Imagine someone who prides themselves on being kind and selfless, but secretly harbors resentment for always putting others first. Instead of confronting this resentment, they may judge others as being selfish, feeling a strong emotional reaction when encountering people who prioritize their own needs. This is projection in action, the unconscious mind, deflecting what it refuses to recognize in itself. Projection is why we sometimes feel an irrational dislike toward certain people, even when we can't quite explain why. It is why particular traits in others provoke us, while other people may not even notice them. The shadow works like a mirror, reflecting back to us what we have denied within ourselves. The stronger the emotional reaction, the more personal the projection. Another way the shadow influences us is through emotional triggers. Have you ever had an intense emotional reaction that felt disproportionate to the situation? Maybe a simple comment from a coworker made you furious, or an offhand remark from a friend left you feeling deeply hurt. When emotions erupt out of proportion, it is often because the shadow has been touched. The situation is not just about what happened in the present moment. It has triggered something buried from the past. For example, a person who was often criticized as a child may develop a shadow wound around feelings of inadequacy. As an adult, they may find themselves overreacting whenever someone offers constructive criticism, not because the feedback was truly harsh, but because it awakened a deeper wound that has never been fully addressed. The shadow does not forget. It carries these suppressed experiences, waiting for moments to surface through powerful emotional reactions. Dreams are another way in which the shadow reveals itself. Jung believed that dreams offer a direct line to the unconscious, allowing us to glimpse the hidden parts of ourselves. Nightmares, in particular, often contain messages from the shadow, unresolved fears, repressed desires, or emotions we have been avoiding. If a dream feels unsettling, it may be worth asking, what is my unconscious trying to tell me? But perhaps the most profound way the shadow shapes our lives is through repetitive patterns. The unconscious seeks resolution, which is why unresolved wounds tend to recreate themselves in our lives, appearing in different forms until we finally confront them. This explains why some people repeatedly find themselves in toxic relationships, always choosing partners who resemble past emotional wounds. Others may experience recurring failures in career or personal growth, held back by invisible forces they cannot name. These are not coincidences. They are patterns of the shadow, repeating until we bring them into awareness. To break free from these unconscious cycles, we must begin by recognizing them. Patterns do not persist without reason. Each one contains a message. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? A more powerful question is, what is this pattern trying to reveal? But awareness alone is not enough. If we want to truly reclaim control over our lives, we must take the next step, confronting what we have spent years avoiding. Because when the shadow remains unaddressed, it does not simply disappear. It grows stronger, manifesting in ways that can become dangerous, both to ourselves and to those around us. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." This statement holds profound truth when it comes to the shadow self. The parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge do not simply disappear. They grow stronger, festering beneath the surface and influencing our lives in ways we don't consciously recognize. The more we push them away, the more power they have over us. Repression is not just avoidance. It is an act of forcefully burying emotions, thoughts, and desires that we deem unacceptable. And like a pressure cooker with no release valve, this repression eventually leads to explosions, whether in the form of emotional outbursts, self-sabotage, destructive habits, or even physical illness. The truth is, we do not escape the shadow by ignoring it. We only ensure that it finds more disruptive ways to make itself known. One of the most common consequences of repression is anger and emotional volatility. People who suppress their emotions often believe they are in control, but in reality, they are walking time bombs. They may go weeks, months, or even years without expressing frustration, only to lash out unexpectedly at something minor. When this happens, they often don't understand why they reacted so strongly. It feels as though the anger came out of nowhere. But in reality, it had been building for a long time. This is the shadow at work. Another way the shadow manifests is through addiction and compulsive behaviors. Many addictions, whether to alcohol, drugs, food, work, or even social media, are attempts to escape uncomfortable emotions lurking in the unconscious. Instead of facing our suppressed fears, insecurities, or traumas, we numb them. The problem is, numbing is only a temporary solution. The more we suppress, the stronger the need for escape becomes, creating an endless cycle. Repression also impacts our physical health. Studies have shown that chronic stress, anxiety, and suppressed emotions can lead to high blood pressure, weakened immune function, and even chronic diseases. The body keeps score, holding on to unresolved emotions that eventually manifest as illness. Jung suggested that many psychological disorders are, at their core, manifestations of the shadow demanding to be acknowledged. But perhaps the most insidious way the shadow affects our lives is through self-sabotage. People who struggle with low self-worth, procrastination, or an inability to accept success are often battling a deep shadow wound. If someone grew up believing they were not good enough, that belief doesn't just disappear. It lives in the unconscious, silently influencing decisions. They may unconsciously reject opportunities, ruin relationships, or create obstacles that keep them stuck, all without realizing that it is their own shadow at work. One particularly dangerous form of shadow suppression is externalized blame. When we refuse to acknowledge our own flaws, we project them onto others. This is why people who deny their own faults often become the most judgmental. They see their own unrecognized darkness reflected in those around them, blaming others for what they cannot face within themselves. This can create toxic relationships, conflicts, and even large-scale societal divisions. So what happens when someone begins to acknowledge their shadow? What changes when we stop running and start listening? The answer is both simple and transformative. We regain control. We stop being puppets of our unconscious and start making choices that align with our true selves. But acknowledging the shadow is only the first step. To truly integrate it, we must engage in shadow work, a process of self-exploration that allows us to bring these hidden parts into conscious awareness. And while this journey may not always be easy, it is the only way to break free from the patterns that have been shaping our lives from the shadows. Carl Jung believed that true psychological growth comes not from rejecting the shadow, but from integrating it. He argued that enlightenment is not about becoming purely good, but about becoming whole, acknowledging both the light and dark within us. This process of embracing and understanding our shadow is called shadow work, and it is one of the most powerful forms of self-discovery and transformation. Modern psychology supports Jung's claims. Studies in cognitive and behavioral psychology suggest that unconscious emotions and suppressed memories influence decision-making, emotional well-being, and even physical health. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology demonstrates that individuals who repress their emotions tend to have higher stress levels, increased anxiety, and a greater likelihood of developing self-destructive behaviors. Another study in psychological science found that suppressed emotions tend to resurface in distorted ways, often leading to aggression, impulsivity, and emotional instability. So how do we begin the process of shadow work? The first step is awareness, recognizing that the shadow exists and understanding how it manifests in our lives. Many people resist this step because it requires confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. But avoidance only strengthens the shadow's grip. The moment we acknowledge it, we begin to weaken its unconscious control over us. One of the simplest and most effective ways to explore the shadow is through journaling. Writing about our emotional triggers, fears, and past experiences helps bring unconscious thoughts to the surface. A powerful exercise is to write about people or behaviors that trigger strong emotional reactions. If someone's arrogance, selfishness, or weakness bothers you deeply, ask yourself, is this something I also suppress within myself? Another technique is mindful self-reflection. Instead of reacting impulsively to strong emotions, take a step back and ask, where is this emotion really coming from? Is it about the present moment, or is it connected to something deeper? Many times our emotional responses are echoes of past wounds. By recognizing these patterns, we take away their power. Meditation and visualization are also useful tools for shadow work. Jung himself believed that dreams and imagination provide insight into the unconscious. A practical exercise is to imagine having a conversation with your shadow self. What would it say to you? What emotions arise? This practice helps to establish a connection with the hidden parts of the psyche in a safe and controlled way. Another important step in shadow work is expressing repressed emotions in a healthy way. This doesn't mean acting on destructive impulses, but rather finding a productive outlet. Many artists, writers, and musicians channel their shadow through creativity, turning their darkness into something meaningful. Others may find relief in physical activity, therapy, or open discussions with trusted friends. Shadow work is not a quick process. It is a lifelong journey of self-awareness. But the benefits are profound. By facing our darkness, we reduce its power over us. Instead of being controlled by unconscious fears and insecurities, we gain the ability to act with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. However, there is one major obstacle to shadow work: resistance. The unconscious mind does not want to be exposed. It will create distractions, rationalizations, and excuses to avoid deep self-exploration. This is why so many people abandon the process before they see results. But for those who persist, the rewards are undeniable. As we continue this journey, an important question arises. What happens when we integrate the shadow? What new strengths do we uncover when we accept our darkness instead of running from it? The answer lies in the next step of the process, the hidden power that emerges when we embrace every part of ourselves. Carl Jung believed that the shadow was not just a collection of our flaws and suppressed weaknesses. It also contained untapped potential. The qualities we deny in ourselves do not disappear. They lie dormant, waiting for the moment we choose to reclaim them. When we embrace our shadow, we do more than free ourselves from its unconscious grip. We unlock strengths, insights, and capacities that we never realized were part of us. One of the greatest benefits of shadow integration is emotional resilience. When we suppress emotions like fear, anger, or sadness, they gain power over us. But when we face them directly, we develop a deeper understanding of ourselves. Instead of being overwhelmed by emotions, we learn to work with them. This leads to greater self-awareness and an ability to handle life's challenges with more stability. Another hidden strength of shadow work is authenticity. Many people live their lives according to what they believe they should be, constantly suppressing aspects of themselves to fit societal expectations. But when we integrate our shadow, we no longer feel the need to present a false version of ourselves to the world. We embrace who we truly are, both the light and the dark, without fear of rejection. This level of authenticity naturally draws people toward us, leading to deeper, more meaningful relationships. Shadow work also fuels creativity and personal growth. History is filled with artists, thinkers, and leaders who channeled their shadow into their work. From Vincent van Gogh's turbulent emotions fueling his paintings to Carl Jung himself using his unconscious imagery to develop groundbreaking theories, the shadow has always been a source of innovation. When we acknowledge our hidden depths, we access new perspectives and ideas that might have been previously blocked. But beyond resilience, authenticity, and creativity, embracing the shadow also leads to personal empowerment. When we accept our darkness, we stop being controlled by it. Instead of being victims of our unconscious fears and desires, we take ownership of them. We stop blaming others for our struggles and begin to see how much power we actually have over our own lives. For example, someone who has always suppressed their anger might discover that, when acknowledged, that same energy can be transformed into determination and strength. Someone who has denied their ambition for fear of seeming selfish might find that embracing it allows them to pursue meaningful goals. The parts of ourselves that we push away are often the same parts that contain the key to our growth. Jung referred to this transformation as individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated individual. It is only by facing our hidden selves that we can truly step into our full potential. The journey is not always easy, but it is the only path to true freedom. But what happens when we bring this level of self-awareness into our relationships and careers? How does integrating the shadow influence the way we interact with others and the opportunities we attract? As we will explore next, the shadow does not just shape our internal world. It plays a significant role in the way we connect with the external world as well. The shadow does not exist in isolation. It follows us into every aspect of our lives, influencing our relationships, our work, and the way we navigate the world. Without realizing it, we project our unresolved issues onto the people around us, attracting situations that reflect our inner conflicts. Until we recognize and integrate our shadow, we will continue to repeat the same dynamics, unable to break free from self-sabotaging cycles. One of the most profound ways the shadow manifests is in our relationships. The qualities we reject within ourselves are often the ones we notice or even despise in others. This is why people with unresolved wounds tend to attract partners or friends who unconsciously trigger their deepest fears. A person who suppresses their need for affection may attract emotionally unavailable partners. Someone who hides their anger may end up in relationships with people who are openly aggressive or controlling. These are not coincidences. They are reflections of the shadow at work. Jung believed that our unconscious mind seeks wholeness, which means it draws us towards situations that expose the parts of ourselves we need to integrate. This is why certain people provoke such strong emotional reactions in us. They mirror something we have not yet faced within ourselves. A controlling boss might trigger unresolved resentment toward authority. A friend's arrogance might remind us of our own suppressed desire for confidence. The people who challenge us the most often hold the key to our own self-awareness. Beyond relationships, the shadow also plays a major role in our careers and professional success. Many people unknowingly sabotage their own progress because of unresolved unconscious beliefs. A fear of failure might cause someone to procrastinate or avoid taking risks. A hidden belief that they are not good enough might lead them to reject opportunities or underplay their achievements. On the other hand, some people fear their own success just as much as they fear failure. If a person has been conditioned to believe that ambition is selfish, they may suppress their own drive, holding themselves back from achieving their full potential. Others may struggle with imposter syndrome, believing that they do not truly deserve the success they have worked for. These limiting beliefs do not come from conscious thought. They are deeply embedded in the shadow, influencing behavior without us realizing it. The key to breaking these patterns is self-awareness. The more we recognize how the shadow is shaping our decisions, the more control we gain over our lives. Instead of reacting emotionally to others, we can start asking, what is this situation revealing about me? What part of myself have I been avoiding? By viewing our experiences as mirrors rather than obstacles, we shift from being passive victims of circumstance to active participants in our own growth. But the real transformation happens when we not only recognize the shadow, but also embrace it as a source of strength. The same traits we once suppressed, our anger, ambition, vulnerability, can become powerful assets when acknowledged and used consciously. By integrating the shadow, we create healthier relationships, make more empowered career choices, and step fully into the person we were always meant to be. As we move toward the final stage of our journey, one question remains. What does life look like when we fully integrate the shadow? How do we transform our darkness into light and step into our highest potential? The answer lies in understanding how embracing the shadow leads to true freedom, self-mastery, and personal transformation. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." True transformation is not about erasing our shadow. It is about understanding it, integrating it, and using it as a source of power rather than a force of destruction. When we finally face our shadow, something remarkable happens. We reclaim the parts of ourselves that were once lost. The suppressed anger that once turned into passive aggression becomes assertiveness. The vulnerability we once feared becomes the foundation of deeper connections. The ambition we rejected out of guilt becomes the drive that helps us pursue our dreams. This is the power of shadow integration. It does not weaken us. It makes us whole. So how do we continue this journey beyond simply recognizing our shadow? First, we must commit to lifelong self-awareness. The shadow is not something that disappears overnight. It is a continuous process of self-exploration. The more we observe our emotional triggers, recurring fears, and unconscious patterns, the more we gain control over them. The key is to remain curious rather than judgmental. When something provokes a strong emotional reaction, instead of pushing it away, ask, what is this trying to teach me? Second, we must practice radical self-acceptance. Many people resist shadow work because they are afraid of what they might find. But the truth is, our darkness is not something to fear. It is simply a part of us that has been neglected. Accepting the shadow does not mean indulging in destructive impulses. but rather acknowledging that every part of us has value. Third, we must learn to use our shadow as a tool for growth. If you recognize that you have a tendency toward jealousy, ask yourself how you can use that energy constructively. Does it point to an unfulfilled desire? Can it motivate you to work harder for what you want rather than resenting others for having it? If you struggle with anger, can you channel it into passion for a cause you care about? The key is not to suppress, but to redirect and refine. The final step is embodiment. Living a life that reflects the full integration of who we are. This means making decisions that align with our true selves rather than the false self we created to fit societal expectations. It means forming relationships based on authenticity rather than fear. It means stepping into our power without hesitation. When we integrate the shadow, we no longer live at the mercy of unconscious forces. We stop blaming the world for our struggles and instead take responsibility for our own growth. We recognize that our fears, wounds, and struggles were never meant to break us. They were meant to teach us. And with this awareness, we step into a life of clarity, confidence, and purpose. As you reflect on this journey, take a moment to ask yourself, what part of me have I been running from? What strength might be hidden in the very traits I have rejected? The answer to these questions could change your life. Now, I invite you to take action. Drop a single word in the comments that resonates with you after this journey, something that represents what this exploration of the shadow has meant to you. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're ready to go even deeper, explore more content on this channel to continue your path toward self-discovery. The shadow will always be there. The difference is, from now on, you will be the one in control.